Hi, this is Brad Garton, and this is the online video, the first of three, for Thursday's Zoom class, April 2nd. In this one, we're going to be talking about late Romanticism, or what happened, towards the end of the 19th century. But before I get into some of the composers involved, I want to talk about something else, this tonal system, tonality that we've been kind of dancing around, and especially what was happening, with that weird Wagner chord, the Tristan chord we talked about. That, that chord, that chord right there, that was something that they couldn't label it properly, music theorists. It didn't quite fit in the tonal system. Now, the tonal system, of course, is the thing that's been developing, even since the monks, through the centuries, through modal music, through modulation in the Renaissance era, up through rules of counterpoint and the development of equal temperament, and then Viennese classical music with Mozart and Beethoven. And it's the thing we all know, this. If I go, you want it to go here. It's just simple. This would be wrong. You want it to go here. It's that tension and then the release we feel that romantic composers use to construct their emotional narrative, to kind of create this world of, surging drama and whatnot. And they were pushing the boundaries, they were changing the kinds of modulations they could do, In a sense, it was also the pursuit of the new, the pursuit of the exotic, try to come up with something that no one has thought of before, that makes me the composer. And even though that chord of Wagner was kind of notorious, there were precursors, obviously. Chopin, in particular, was doing very strange things with his music. Even that short, famous prelude of his, this thing right here. That chord, that's a weird chord, because you've gone from this system, this tonal system, to here, in just a few short modulations. And it's interesting because Chopin did that by drawing upon his Polish roots. He's looking at his the dances and the folk music of his youth. Liszt was doing the same thing with Hungarian music. And these different folk musics, they were kind of evolving separately. They were more involved with the dances of festivals and the instruments that were being used. So they could kind of pull that out of their past and use it as a way forward, coming up with these interesting new modulations that sounded pretty good to us, and they made sense of it within that kind of tonal system. But the whole thing was beginning to kind of creak and start to fall apart. Now, along with this identification, Chopin is Polish, Liszt as Hungarian, Wagner obviously as German. That was another aspect of things that were beginning to develop towards the end of the 19th century, this sense of nationalism. What it meant to be a composer with a particular cultural background. Again, this is the Romantic era. It's all about who I am. And who I am was increasingly bound up with where did I come from? And the first composer that we're going to kind of look at along these lines is a composer named Edvard Grieg. Okay? And Grieg lived from 1843 to 1907. He was born in Bergen in Norway, and he became a quintessential Norwegian composer. He drew upon the Hardanger fiddle music of Norway to inform his kind of compositional style. He was kind of a conservative romantic, but at the same time, his music was very different because of this Norwegian influence. And it's not something that people were taking lightly. The King of Norway felt his music was so vital to the soul, to the culture of the Norwegian people, that they gave Grieg a stipend for the rest of his life, pretty good gig, for him to write his music. And a lot of his music was indeed based on Norwegian tales and stuff. In fact, he engaged in what we call, I mentioned this before, program music. This is music that had a particular thing that was being represented. It wasn't the abstract music of Mozart or, some of Beethoven, a lot of Beethoven. This was specific to a story, a tale, a situation. And some of his most famous work came from a series, he actually did 2 of these, a series of pieces called a suite, the Peer Gynt Suite. Now, Peer Gynt was a famous kind of Norwegian folk entity. He's kind of like the quintessential Norwegian. He's this fictitious guy that went around and climbed up mountains and fjords and ate lutefisk and did whatever Norwegian people did, and had all kinds of adventures. And Grieg created pieces kind of like documenting some of those adventures, following the path of the story. And the first I'm going to play for you, these are pretty famous works. You've probably heard this before, but here we go. Yeah, this piece is called In the Hall of the Mountain King. The story is that apparently Peer Gynt was hiking along and he saw a bunch of dwarves that were heading up into this cave. Now, this is not a common sight, so he thought, well, I'll go follow them in and see what's going on. Kind of a dangerous thing to do. When he got inside, they were having some dwarvish festival, and they were beginning to kind of really ramp it up. And pretty soon, the dwarf king came out, and they started to really kind of, go berserk. And Peer Gynt began to get a little bit afraid. Are really starting to really have at it. They're dancing around the fire, and the king comes out. Oh So towards the end, apparently, they saw Peer Gynt, and he said, oh my God, all hell's going to break loose. I better get out of here. So he ran away and survived, obviously. It's funny because you're hearing now also in the orchestration or the way that the instruments are being used, there's a lot more percussion in this. Apparently that was a feature of folk music, is that they had a lot of percussion and such. A lot of dances, so this is very, very kind of out there music. And you also even heard in that Grieg is using some uncommon harmonies. Here's another piece from his Peer Gynt Suite No. 1. Like I said, he did 2 of these. And this is called Anitra's Dance. And listen to the way he's negotiating major and minor and kind of fluidly going between the two. That's kind of an interesting chord there. Yeah, interesting modulation. But he brings it back around. You can hear the bell, the percussion, even in this. So it has that almost, I wouldn't say alien, but it has an exoticism to it. But in this case, the exoticism is coming from his past. It's his culture. It's exotic to us because we're not Norwegian. But this is part and parcel of how he's constructing this music. Here's another one. This is called Åsa's Death. And it's listen again to the chords that he's choosing. It's a beautiful piece. It's major, it's minor. It sounds melancholy, but it just seems like it's just like life. Listen to this chord right here. Oh my. Here it is again. That's not a chord easily found in the tonal system. So these composers are trying to find new sounds, they're trying to find new ways of constructing their music and constructing it in a way that was meaningful for them as individuals, as members of a culture, as the person that they are. Now, Grieg unfortunately suffered the fate that some of our other romantic composers did, in that he wrote some pieces that are now very well known. Well, let me just play this one. This is also from Peer Gynt Suite No. 1, called Morning Mood. Turn this up. Here we go. Yeah. Many cartoons. Anytime they depict the cartoon characters out in nature, you'll hear this because it's so beautiful. I mean, it sounds like a natural thing because that's what Grieg was trying to do with it. And it's too bad because it's really a lovely piece. It's a beautiful melody and it has these great parts like this. Again, those nice swelling romantic chords. Anyhow, like I said, this is how these people were trying to, set themselves up. Next, we're going to talk about some Russian composers, some music that I particularly like, and stay tuned.